The desert night around Culiacan held a secret beneath its shifting sands, a whispered darkness that even the stars seemed reluctant to pierce. Somewhere under the dry earth a tunnel wound its way, a hidden artery through which one of the world's most notorious criminals, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, had built an empire. And within that subterranean passage, hope and hubris collided with fear and law. Yet when the FBI and Mexican authorities finally closed in, the question remained: could an empire built in darkness survive the unblinking scrutiny of justice? From an early age, El Chapo understood how to move in shadows. He did not simply walk paths that others could see. He built beneath them. His world was both above and under, a duality of money and murder, power and silence. In the arid hills of Sinaloa, he rose as a drug trafficker, one who learned the terrain not by maps but by tunnels. He commissioned labyrinthine routes, some stretching miles, dug by forced labor, engineered with ventilation and lighting and tracks for moving loads of contraband. Those tunnels became arteries of commerce, carrying drugs, cash, weapons, and men. They whispered of ingenuity and ruthlessness, of ambition that would not rest even when pursued by law. His network extended like roots. Along the Pacific coast, through the mountains, across borders, he carved paths that allowed him to bypass official scrutiny. When a border crossing choked, he sent his cargo underground. When radar probed the skies, he sent his freight through subterranean chambers. In doing so, he earned a nickname rarely uttered by his peers: the Tunnel King. Yet to many at home and abroad, he was more than a trafficker. He was a phantom monarch, someone who seemed untouchable, someone who inhabited the borderlands between kingdoms of crime and the sovereign states that tried to contain him. Through bribery, violence, and strategy, he built alliances, and when rivals threatened, he buried them in silence. His reputation grew as someone who could vanish or return at will, whose fingerprints could vanish even from the walls of his compounds. In Mexico and the United States, law enforcement watched, frustrated. They failed to keep up with him. Many believed he had eyes and ears everywhere, that to challenge him was to summon disaster. But when tragedies multiplied, the pressure mounted. The FBI received tips, intercepted communications, followed money trails. They began to see patterns, faint signals in the darkness. They saw tunnels not just as local oddities, but as a structural challenge to drug enforcement. The agents assigned to the case studied clandestine engineering, surveillance, infiltration. They befriended informants, planted bugs, worked across borders with Mexican agents whose own courage and corruption danced in uneasy alliance. They understood that to bring him down, they had to match his subterranean cunning with patient, elegant strategy. The agents who labored on the case carried images of suffering. Families shattered by overdose, communities turned into war zones by drug violence, children who grew up among graves. For them, the mission was more than a challenge. It was a burden and a vow. They worked nights, pored over maps, crisscrossed continents in jets and cars and covert missions. In their hearts, they felt frustration when suspects slipped away. They felt guilt when leads froze. They felt the weight of deadlines and political pressure. Each revelation about tunnels loomed like a ghost. Agents learned of shafts hidden under warehouses, of ventilation disguised as wells, of secret rails lowered into pits. They learned of tunnels crossing under neighborhoods, passing beneath highways and rivers, emerging in warehouses or garages far from any suspicion. They studied soil maps, satellite images, seismic pressure changes. They sent engineers and geologists into the chase. They asked whether moles or ground-penetrating radar or acoustic sensors could detect hollow cavities. They experimented, they risked. Their frustration sometimes turned to despair. Months of digging, of staking out properties, of planting bugs and watching them go silent, of informants being eliminated, of leads turning cold. All of it threatened to bury the mission in darkness. Meanwhile, El Chapo reigned. He continued to move product, to expand distribution networks, to evade capture. His couriers grew more daring, his bribes more lavish, his defenses more paranoid. He set traps for pursuers, even sent teams to target law enforcement. Through it all, at the margin of each dossier, an image arose. Guzman lying in some hidden chamber, perhaps under the desert, listening. perhaps watching the ground tremble above his secrets. The agents knew that to catch him, they would have to invade his tunnels, illuminate them, confront the king underground. The breakthrough arrived in the fall of 2014. A tip from an informant inside the cartel gave a location of what seemed to be a newly built tunnel in Mexicali, near the border with California. Suddenly, the FBI and Mexican authorities had a lead that might connect El Chapo's network directly to the United States. Local Mexican police, the Mexican military, and federal agents prepared to coordinate a raid. They constructed a plan to enter the tunnel from both ends. They scrambled teams with flashlights and explosives and cameras, with extraction squads waiting. When they broke in, the corridor unfurled beneath them. Steel rails, lighting, ventilation fans. The agents moved slowly, voices muffled, hearts pounding, flashlights cutting through gloom. They saw compartments, niches carved into rock, pallets prepared for loads of narcotics. The smell of damp earth, the hum of fans, the tightness of confinement, all hit them with claustrophobic power. And yet, they found only traces of drugs transported, of money passed through, of cables. They found evidence that El Chapo's network had used this artery. But the king himself was not present. They recovered shipments, broke the communication lines, arrested guards. The tunnel was sealed and altered, neutralized. Even so, that crack was small but profound. It showed vulnerability. It showed that the creature beneath the soil could be pierced. It emboldened agents. It spurred them to share intelligence, to escalate pressure. It made El Chapo nervous. He increased security, shifted tactics, ordered new tunnels built deeper, more remote, more unexpected. For every tunnel closed, new ones sprang up. But the momentum had shifted. In parallel, agents in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles chased shipments, arrested mid-level lieutenants, leveraged plea bargains, flipped witnesses. They traced money through shell corporations, through offshore accounts to banks in Latin America and Europe. Every arrest, every indictment, every forfeiture constricted the network like a tightening noose. The walls had begun to compress. Joaquin Guzman was not a man content to rest. Even while under fugitive status, he remained involved in the orders, the construction, the grand designs. He had engineers, geologists, tunnel diggers, cartographers. He pulled blueprints from memory. He instructed the placement of ventilation shafts, drainage systems, lighting, and rails. The subterranean domain fascinated him. He watched tunnels built, measured angles, supervised ventilation, tested escape routes. The earth was his canvas, and he painted with cocaine and cash. Even his prison escapes were tied into the tunnel logic. In 2015, he tunneled out of a maximum security prison in Mexico, slipping through a mile-long passage that rose into a bathroom in one building outside the facility. That escape stunned law enforcement. The audacity, the precision, the engineering, it was a monument to his belief that subterranean passage was his domain. But it also betrayed hubris. He assumed control beneath soil he did not own, claiming sovereign rights under earth he did not legally possess. After his escape, the manhunt intensified. Mexican authorities and the United States combined pressure. A media storm followed. Mexico deployed thousands of soldiers, helicopters, drones. The U.S. offered rewards. Interpol flagged, notices flew. Meanwhile, El Chapo moved to hide deeper, to shift his hideouts to places no one suspected. Ranches in the mountains, islands, hidden bunkers. But he could not abandon the tunnels. They remained his lifelines, his pride, his tool. He kept ordering new ones, deeper and longer, more intricate. In his own mind, he must have believed that somewhere in the earth he had built an inviolable fortress. Yet each new tunnel demanded more manpower, more supplies, more secrecy, more risk. The more complex the network, the more points of failure. Corruption had to multiply. Engineers bribed, workers silenced, watchers paid. Every tunnel was a liability. Every digger could talk. Every ventilation shaft could be discovered. Every blueprint, if leaked or betrayed, was ammunition in the hands of the agents. One day, a low-level tunnel crewman cooperating with government agents described a tunnel so ambitious that it would run under a river, emerge on the U.S. side, and bypass dozens of checkpoints. The agents listened, planned, analyzed soil maps. They traced truck movements of concrete and rebar and ventilation pipe. They triangulated communications. They watched air goods. They prepared. In early 2016, the agents had enough to act. A tunnel complex near Los Mochis, Sinaloa, showed up in intercepted calls and satellite images. The shape and direction suggested it might reach into the United States. Teams assembled across jurisdictions: the FBI, DEA, Mexican DTO squads, local police, the Mexican military, technicians, engineers. They laid plans in secret rooms, in secure compounds, in joint command posts. They rehearsed. As they prepared, El Chapo sensed danger. He moved resources, altered patterns, relocated safe houses. He subdivided operations. He compartmentalized knowledge. He isolated workers from each other. He limited who knew what. He ordered more surveillance of his own couriers. He planted traps for informants. He shifted his routines. But human nature proved harder to control. Someone, somewhere, broke under pressure or longed for a new life. Someone passed a crumb, a little code, a map, a direction. On a night in late spring, the raid began. Mexican forces quietly surrounded multiple properties. The agents, dressed in dark uniforms with helmets and gear, slipped into position just before dawn. Remote cameras and sensors had been planted in advance. Acoustic sensors detected hollow voids. Ground-penetrating radar revealed new cavities. They located ventilation shafts. They dug small tunnels from the surface to probe. They cut wires, closed outlets, disabled fans. They breached one entrance softly. They approached the passage. Inside the tunnel, the teams advanced under low light, moving slowly, scanning walls, holding fingers on triggers. The smell of moist earth, the hum of residual airflow, the faint echo of distant voices, all accompanied them. They felt claustrophobia even though they had training. They heard the slightest metallic clink. They turned corners. They encountered junctions. They encountered branch tunnels. They found packages wrapped in plastic, crates of narcotics, bundles of cash. They encountered tripwires and some booby traps. Some areas were flooded or muddy. Some chambers had remnants of recent activity. Discarded tools, water bottles, cell phones. At one juncture, they encountered guards, frightened men in tunnel vests. A firefight erupted in the tight space, muffled and terrifying. Bullets ricocheted off rock. Agents shut down branches and sealed others. They advanced carefully, methodically. One team pressed onward. They found a large subterranean chamber, hidden compartments. They discovered a path rising toward the surface. They pried open a hatch. They waited for support to breach upward. And there, climbing the final ladder into an innocuous building, they found a stunned lieutenant who had not expected intruders from below. He was cuffed, questioned, frightened. The agents learned that this tunnel was part of Guzman's network, connected to other routes, but not yet fully complete. It was a web, not a single line. The crackdown would take time, but the bust was significant. It was the kind of incursion into his realm that he had never allowed before. In 2016, the United States formally indicted El Chapo. The U.S., eager to assert jurisdiction, consolidated charges of drug trafficking, conspiracy, firearms offenses, money laundering. The Mexican government launched a version of the operation inside its own tribunals. Guzmán found himself under siege on multiple fronts. The tunnel system that had once been his fortress was now a liability, a graveyard of secrets and betrayals. He was recaptured in January 2016. Mexican forces cornered him in a hideout in Sinaloa. The moment he was seized, many believed his reign was over. But his defenders still tried to rally, tried to break him out, tried to leverage connections. He still had loyalists in the government, in security agencies, in the corridors of power. He still had money and threats and fear. In December of 2016, the Mexican government extradited him to the United States. He arrived in a high-security prison in New York under layers of restraint, under armed guards in solitary confinement. His empire now boiled down to courtroom filings and legal footnotes. His subterranean kingdom locked behind bars. In America, the prosecutors built a massive case. They called witnesses, former allies, cartel lieutenants, tunnel engineers, bribed officials. They presented 56 kilograms of cocaine, 3,000 kilograms, shipping routes, financial ledgers, videos, intercepted calls, photographs. They showed blueprints of tunnels, maps of compounds, phone records, bank transfers. They invited jurors to peer into the dark world beneath Earth. The spectacle was riveting, but behind the spectacle lay human tragedies. Witnesses trembled under threats. Some entered witness protection. Some vanished. Some died. The families of victims waited, battered. The agents who hunted Guzmán felt satisfaction, but also sorrow, that so many had suffered, that justice came late. The courtroom was not a battlefield, but an altar of consequences. At the trial, Guzmán was defiant, inscrutable, even smiling. He denied most charges, challenged witness credibility, claimed entrapment. He maintained his persona as a folk legend, but the evidence overwhelmed him. The jury returned verdicts of guilt on all counts. The judge sentenced him to life plus 30 years. He was remanded to a supermax prison in Colorado. Once the king was behind walls, the tunnels continued to haunt. Authorities continued to discover new shafts, new routes, hidden in plain sight beneath homes, farms, warehouses. Some tunnels remained operational, though under new management, though under increased risk. Others were flooded, collapsed, abandoned. Some were unearthed by chance during construction, by farmers digging wells, by police raids. Agents and engineers created a new discipline, tunnel forensics. They mapped abandoned passages, traced airflow, used seismic sensors, magnetic resonance imaging, new ground-penetrating radar, drones that lowered mini-robots down shafts, cameras on robotic crawlers. They analyzed timber beams, drain lines, wiring. They considered each discovery a small victory over darkness. In the cartel world, Guzmán's downfall left a vacuum. Rival factions fought. Violence escalated. Some tunnel networks were claimed by others. Some shifted to simpler methods, border crossings, drones, go-fast boats. The tunnel kingdom lost some of its dominance. The logistics of large-scale subterranean transport became more difficult under constant scrutiny. The king was gone, but the legacy of underground smuggling endured. Meanwhile, inside his cell, Guzmán remained influential in rumor. Some say he still communicated with cartel leaders. Some say he brooded over maps and memories. Some believe he watched the news with satisfaction for his legend. Some believe he plotted further. But the power was diminished. The king of tunnels had become a prisoner of stone. If you're still watching, please subscribe so that more people can discover these powerful true stories. Even now, long after his conviction, the story lingers in the soil and in memory. Tunnels remain hidden arteries beneath towns and farmlands. Construction crews sometimes uncover shafts, and shafts lead into nothingness that echoes like a sigh. The shadows of his reign cross borders, communities, governments. The hunt for subterranean smugglers continues. El Chapo's downfall teaches many things. It teaches that hubris and overreach weaken even the mightiest. It teaches that empires built on fear and secrecy are vulnerable to betrayal and persistence. It teaches that law, though slow, can reach beneath soil and behind walls. It also teaches a darker lesson, that when a man builds tunnels under the earth, he unleashes ruptures not just in geography but in morality. Fissures that can swallow lives, that can poison communities, that can stain institutions. One evening, I imagine an agent turning off the lights in that Colorado Supermax cell block, walking off into the silence. I imagine Guzmán lying awake in isolation, in that cold concrete room, thinking of tunnels he designed, tunnels that lined ranches, tunnels that crossed deserts, tunnels he thought would never be discovered. I imagine him listening for echoes in his mind, the hum of fans, the clink of rails, the soft drip of subterranean water. I think of the families who lost children to addiction, of neighborhoods terrorized by drug violence, of young men who surrendered to trafficking as escape from poverty. I think of the agents who carried nightmares home. I think of the engineers and informants who died or vanished or hid forever. I think of soil turned to rubble, the mapping of darkness, the droning of machinery, the final sealing of passages. And I wonder, If justice ever catches all those tunnels, will we believe we have conquered the darkness at all, or only postpone the next outbreak? In the end, the Tunnel King fell not just because of force, but because his dominion contained too many secrets, too many weak points, too many betrayals. He fought beneath the soil, but he was brought down in daylight in courtrooms, in cells. His tunnels remain beneath cities and deserts and rivers, but their king lies confined to steel and stone. What do you think truly happened? Share your thoughts in the comments.